Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening.
After a long pause, Lucian tamped down the emotions in his eyes and said calmly, "I've asked the specialists to check on you. They'll be here soon." No sooner had he said that, several specialists came rushing over. They were horrified when they saw Roxanne sitting up in the hospital bed. "Miss Jarvis, please lie down quickly. There's still residual toxins in your body that has yet to be flushed out. We want to perform a checkup on you, then prescribe some targeted medication." She was very clear-headed when it came to her condition, and she replied, "There's no need for that. It has been cleared." The others frowned, their expressions reflecting their disbelief. How is that possible? We all saw for ourselves how serious her condition was yesterday. How could she have gotten better after just one night's sleep? Roxanne merely smiled and did not say anything. Utterly incredulous, a few of them stepped forward to check on her. After they did so, everyone could not help but feel dumbfounded. They could not believe that she had almost fully recovered, and there were barely any traces of toxins left in her body. She explained to them calmly, "I performed acupuncture on myself this morning to detoxify my body. I can sense that I've gotten rid of almost all of the toxins, but I don't know whether the little that remains will still have severe effects." Upon hearing her reply, the specialists looked at each other. After some time, one of them finally turned toward Roxanne with a look of admiration. "We've long heard of your impressive acupuncture skills. Today, we've finally witnessed with our own eyes just how amazing it is." Initially, they planned to treat the toxins in her body slowly through medication. None of them expected that she would succeed in getting rid of most of it through a single acupuncture treatment. Despite the shower of praise from those top specialists, Roxanne's expression remained unchanged. "My teacher taught me everything I know, and I've merely put what I learned into practice. So, what are the results of your checkup? Do I still need treatment for the toxins in my body?" The remaining toxins aren't a lot, and your body can eliminate them through metabolization," answered the head of the specialists. As he spoke, however, he sensed someone glaring at him in annoyance from behind. A shudder ran through his body, and he quickly added, "Nonetheless, I suggest you stay at the hospital for a couple of days for observation. As you know, your condition yesterday after getting poisoned was quite serious." She nodded calmly and said quietly, "I got it. Thanks for everything you all did yesterday." The specialists immediately waved their hands dismissively. "That's what we should have done. If there's someone who should be thanked, it's Mr. Farwell. He stayed in the ward the whole time to look after you." At that, she subconsciously glanced toward the man standing at the door to the ward. Lucian's brows were tightly knitted, and he did not have time to drop the worried look etched across his face. When his eyes met Roxanne's, he looked away nonchalantly. She was surprised to see his concerned expression, and a scarlet flush crept up her cheeks. "If there's nothing else, we'll be going out. Please get lots of rest these 2 days. Should you need anything, feel free to let us know." Noticing the peculiar atmosphere between the pair, the specialists quickly excused themselves. Returning to her senses, she smiled at them and watched as they left. Soon, Lucian and Roxanne were the only ones left in the ward. She had finally managed to compose herself, but after that remark the specialist made, her emotions were all over the place again, and she was at a loss for words. Lucian also seemed lost in thought and was silent for a long time. To cover up the panic she felt inwardly, she took her phone from the table and glanced at it. As soon as she did so, she saw on the screen that she had nearly 20 missed calls. More than half of them were from Archie and Benny, while the rest were from Jack. Roxanne could not resist asking, "Was Mr. Damaris here yesterday?" As soon as she asked that question, Lucian's expression shifted instantly, and the air around him grew heavy with tension. She was taken aback by the change in him and wondered whether she had said something she should not have again. "It's just that I happened to see Jack's calls. and it reminded me that he was with me before I fell unconscious yesterday. Besides, he was right next to me when the gas was released. As that thought crossed her mind, she could not help worrying a little over what had happened to him. Does he mean that much to you? Besides the kids, is he the first person you care about after recovering? He stared at her intently, slowly moving closer to the hospital bed as he spoke. Puzzled by his sudden anger, she frowned and asked, I was only asking because I could see he tried calling me quite a few times. Moreover, he was with me when I got poisoned. He was with you when you passed out, Lucian said, cutting in before she finished her sentence. Recalling the scene, Roxanne nodded without hesitation. I don't know whether I'm reading too much into it, but it seems as though Lucian's statement has a deeper meaning. Standing next to the bed, he gazed down at her and asked in an interrogative tone, Just so, have you wondered why both of you inhaled the toxic gas, yet only you lost consciousness from getting poisoned and suffered severe symptoms while he's still fit as a fiddle? Upon hearing that, she was stunned as what he was implying finally struck her. He suspects that the experiment went wrong because Jack tampered with it. When that realization dawned on her, she contradicted him without a second thought. There's no reason for Mr. Damaris to do that. Seeing that she was willing to defend Jack at the drop of a hat, Lucian's gaze darkened, and his tone turned even more solemn as he responded. I see that you trust him a lot. Alarmed by the palpable tension that suddenly radiated around him, she realized she had spoken too hastily and consciously softened her tone. It isn't a matter of whether I trust him or not. It's just that the Damaris family was the one who spearheaded this project, and they've put a lot of effort into it. The project was finally progressing to a new stage, so there's no reason for him to throw a spanner in the works. What's more, I'm the one who has been responsible for the research on the core technology of this project, and I'm the one who knows it best. If Jack does indeed want to harm me, that means he has already decided to give up on this project. However, so many people are involved in the project, and it has been disclosed to the public previously. Hence, his actions will only do more harm than good. Seeing that her response was similar to what Jack had said the previous day, Lucian's displeasure intensified. He retorted, Is that so? In that case, why don't you tell me who would have done that apart from him? Was it Dr. Galloway? She furrowed her brows again. Dr. Galloway wouldn't do something like that. We've worked together for a long time, and I trust him. Besides, he wouldn't have had the chance to tamper with the lab table. During the few minutes he was there, I was next to him. Even if he did plan to do something, he wouldn't have had time. Also, I don't see any reason for him to do so. It annoyed Lucian to see how protective she was of Colby, and he said in a mocking tone, well, who else could it have been? You? Did you create the toxic gas because you were too stressed at work and wanted to end it once and for all? Roxanne was rendered speechless at that. After all, it was indeed true that the three of them had been in charge of the project since the beginning. Naturally, I wouldn't shoot myself in the foot, so that leaves only Jack and Colby. That being said, I don't want to doubt any of them since one of them is the project leader while the other is my longtime partner. Seeing how adamant she was, Lucian felt his anger rise. If I remember correctly, Jack had something to do with the fire incident at the research institute previously as well. Hearing that, Roxanne gave him a confused look. Why would he say something like that? She then said, Mr. Damaris left after delivering those medicines. So what do you mean when you said that incident has something to do with him? Not wanting to get into an argument with Lucian, she reined in her temper and added gently, You of all people should know how those medicines came to be, so why would Mr. Damaris do something that won't benefit him at all? After speaking, she raised her head to look at Lucian's cold expression and heaved a helpless sigh inwardly before continuing. Lucian, you need to calm down. You can't just say something like this based on your own subjective emotions without any evidence to support it. With how smart, sharp, and decisive Lucian is, his irrational words now are making me doubt whether the man before me is really the CEO of Farwell Group. I am calm. Fury was bubbling deep within Lucian's heart, and he uttered coldly, That storage room of your research institute has had no problems for so many years, but it burns up the moment he stored his medicines in it. Don't you think it's too much of a coincidence?" In response, Roxanne patiently explained, there really weren't any problems when he stored the medicines in the room. If you don't believe me, feel free to ask Dr. Galloway about it since he was there at the time." As she spoke, she kept her gaze trained on Lucian's face, her eyes glinting with emotions known only to herself. He looks so angry whenever he talks about the fire incident. There isn't a single trace that suggests he's faking it, so I guess I can finally stop suspecting him. I've misunderstood him. I'm certain now that he has nothing to do with the fire. Hearing her words, Lucian seemed to recall something and stated coldly, "Your words just reminded me that Dr. Galloway was at the scene of the fire as well." Roxanne snapped back to her senses when she realized that her words had caused Lucian to cast his doubt on Colby. She tried to explain, "This incident has nothing to do with them. We've already looked into this. Turns out, someone bribed one of the researchers at the institute to go in and set the fire." Unexpectedly, Lucian's expression darkened further the more she tried to explain. "Oh well, who else could have done this except Jack?" Words eluded Roxanne once again. She knew there was some truth in his words. After all, there was only a handful of people in Horrington who was capable of finding out the background of all personnel in the Research Institute and bribing them in such a short period of time. The same goes for the people that were involved in the project. Before this, Roxanne had always suspected Lucian to have had a hand in this. As such, she didn't entertain the possibility that it could have been someone else. However, now that she had eliminated all her doubts about Lucian, Jack was looking more and more to be the culprit. Nonetheless, she was still of the opinion that Jack had no reason to do such a thing. It seems like you trust him very much," Lucian scoffed. "Your trust in Colby is built through years of cooperation, but what about Jack? How long have you known each other? Do you really know him that well?" Roxanne felt her heart start to waver after hearing Lucian's words. However, she couldn't help but think that his tone sounded rather odd. He is indeed suspecting Jack to be the culprit, but why does his last sentence? Roxanne mulled over it for a moment when she suddenly thought of something, and a touch of surprise flashed across her eyes. "Before this, Lucian kept losing his temper with me because I was getting too close to Jack. Naturally, he's pissed off about the same thing this time as well. He's probably angry that I'm defending Jack. Wait, could he be jealous of Jack?" Just as that thought flashed into her mind, Roxanne snapped back to her senses and glanced at Lucian uneasily before retracting her gaze. "Somehow, I can't associate the word jealous with the man before me. It's simply impossible for Lucian to feel jealousy." Nonetheless, now that the thought was in Roxanne's mind, it was like it had taken root and she couldn't get rid of it. As a result, she no longer dared to meet Lucian's eyes. Her breath hitched as she said, "Although it's true that I don't know Jack that well, I just can't find any reason to doubt him since he's the project leader." Seemingly satisfied with her statement, Lucian gave a soft snort in response. After hesitating for a while, Roxanne made up her mind. Since we have different opinions, we'll let the evidence speak for itself." She finally had the courage to look Lucian in the eyes as she added, "What do you think of my suggestion, Mr. Farwell?" Seeing how Roxanne was still unwilling to doubt Jack but was sensible enough to make a concession with him, Lucian felt his anger subside slightly. Fine, I'll go along with it. I'll show you the evidence so that you can see what kind of a person he really is." Roxanne nodded. The truth is all I want. Anyway, Dr. Galloway is in charge of the Research Institute, so I'll tell him to give you free rein during this period of time in order for you to look into this matter." Lucian agreed to it without saying anything more. It could be said that the two of them had reached an agreement. As promised, the first thing that Roxanne did was give Colby a call. It took a while before the latter answered. The moment the call was connected, Colby's apologetic and helpless voice rang out. Dr. Jarvis, how are you doing? I'm sorry, I should have paid you a visit earlier, but I really have no idea where Mr. Farwell has taken you." Hearing that, Roxanne subconsciously glanced at the man beside her. All she knew was that Lucian was the one who brought her to the hospital. As for what happened during and after she fell unconscious, she had no clue about it. Judging from Colby's words, I'm guessing Lucian must have done something unpleasant when he took me away. Lucian frowned, but he didn't try to explain, for he thought that there was no need for him to give an explanation just because of Colby's words. Seeing that, Roxanne could only retract her gaze. She then said to Colby, I'm fine now, thank you for your concern, Dr. Galloway. Colby's voice was still tinged with guilt when he said, what happened yesterday was too sudden. Several researchers were more or less affected by it. As a result, I have been so busy since yesterday that I forgot to call you. This is wrong of me. Roxanne could imagine the chaos that must have ensued in the research institute after she collapsed. Coupled with the leakage of toxic gases, she reckoned some may have even been poisoned. With me being in a coma and hospitalized, I'm sure Colby must be feeling exhausted trying to clean up the mess all alone for one whole day. With that thought in mind, Roxanne said apologetically, I'm sorry. I was too careless and caused you trouble again. Hearing Roxanne's apology, there was a flash of smugness in Colby's eyes, but his tone was full of concern. As long as you get better, it doesn't matter how tired I get. I thought, forget it. Let's not talk about this. Why did you call? Uneasy, Roxanne said, I'm afraid I'll have to continue to trouble you. Colby was busy since yesterday after she fell unconscious. Recently, they needed to carry out an investigation. Due to that, they had to ask for Colby's help to grant them free rein. For everything Colby had done, Roxanne felt nothing but sorry for him. Colby, on the other end of the phone, was working overtime at the Research Institute, handling the surveillance footage of the research facility. He froze momentarily when he heard what Roxanne said, but soon returned to normal. What is it? Go on. I'll try my best to help. Roxanne said with a grateful smile. Mr. Farwell and I want to investigate yesterday's incident. In the process, we will need permission to access the Research Institute. Thus, we'll need some help from you. At that, Colby became tense and felt his throat tighten. He was fine with Roxanne carrying out an investigation, but didn't expect Lucian to be involved. I only asked Lucian to come yesterday to watch him fight with Jack, not to investigate me. It will be trouble if Lucian intervenes. Colby wasn't confident to hide the truth from Lucian's discerning eyes. Dr. Galloway? Roxanne urged in confusion since she didn't receive a reply from him. Colby abruptly returned to his senses and tried to sound calm. I'm sorry. I was up all night yesterday, so I zoned out. All right, I got it. Feel free to tell me when you need help. Without sparing another thought, Roxanne thanked him politely, so thank you and have a good rest. Absent-mindedly, Colby promised to help her. After a few seconds, he hung up the phone. When the two were on the phone, Lucian listened to their conversation at the side the whole time. He found Colby's response slightly strange. However, a nobody like Colby wasn't significant enough to bother him, so he didn't give it much thought. He brushed it off and took it as his lack of sleep. I've already told Dr. Galloway. Roxanne's voice sounded from the ward. This matter cannot be delayed. If someone did plan it, that person would have more time to destroy the evidence if we delay. Let's start the investigation as soon as possible. Naturally, Lucian was well aware of this simple theory. I know. I'll start to investigate after you rest. In response, Roxanne frowned. I want to join the investigation too. After all, this happened because of me. I'm the victim, so I can't do nothing and wait. Moreover, no matter what Lucian was thinking, Roxanne was worried about letting him investigate by himself because he was prejudiced against Jack. Lucian saw through her thoughts and narrowed his eyes in displeasure. Are you worried I would fabricate evidence against Jack? Hearing that, Roxanne's eyes flashed with a hint of guilt, but she quickly concealed that. I just think it will be fairer that way. Lucian sneered. I understand what you mean, but your condition doesn't allow you to do that. The specialist advised you to rest in the hospital for a few days. So, that's what you should do. Don't worry. I only want to find the real culprit who hurt you, although I'm suspicious of Jack. I'll deal with him later." The two were stunned by his words. Surprised, Roxanne looked at Lucian. She felt more triggered by what he said just now than when he told her he wanted to court her back then. Lucian's face showed a hint of awkwardness when he met Roxanne's eyes. Soon, he regained his composure. "Yeah, let's do as you say if you feel it's appropriate." A moment later, Lucian behaved as if nothing had happened. "You're a doctor yourself, so you should know your condition well. The experts said the residual poison in your body is almost gone. You can be discharged from the hospital soon." He changed the topic abruptly and sounded unnatural. His expression intrigued Roxanne, and she almost burst out laughing. Then, she said, "Then, Mr. Farwell, please help me with the discharge procedures. We can start the investigation earlier." Lucian agreed to it without saying anything more and went to handle her discharge procedures. Feeling uneasy, Lucian confirmed with the experts again that it was okay for Roxanne to be discharged after leaving the ward. Originally, the experts were forced to allow Roxanne to stay for observation due to Lucian. Thus, they immediately assured Lucian that Roxanne could be discharged without a problem. After that, Lucian went to handle Roxanne's discharge procedure. When he got back to the ward, Roxanne was ready to leave. Lucian was in a daze looking at the smiling lady in a dress before him. Yesterday, Roxanne looked extremely pale, and he was shocked to see her in a hospital gown. Thus, he felt strange now that she looked well. "Are you done?" Roxanne was confused since he stood at the door silently. Lucian snapped out of his reverie when he heard her voice. Yes, let's go. I'll send you home." Just like that, they entered the elevator one after another. I can go home by myself. I've already caused you much trouble for yesterday," Roxanne rejected politely. Lucian sounded calm. "Essie is at your place. I want to see her." Since he had spelled things out so clearly, Roxanne could no longer refuse his offer. The two got out of the elevator and walked to the hospital's entrance when it started to drizzle. The light rain dispelled the sweltering heat. Many people on the road walked in it calmly. Roxanne decided to brave the rain and run to the parking lot too. To her surprise, Lucian grabbed her by her waist as soon as she lifted her foot. Halting in her tracks, Roxanne instinctively looked at him and wanted to break free from his grip. "You just recovered, so you're still weak. It's best to avoid the rain." Lucian frowned slightly, and his deep voice sounded beside her ear. Roxanne felt his breath on the side of her ear and a wave of numbness that came with it. She couldn't help but be in a daze. By the time she snapped back to reality, Lucian was holding tightly onto her waist as they walked into the rain. Lucian covered their heads with his coat as they strode toward the parking lot. Seeing Lucian's profile, Roxanne couldn't help but think of how he took care of her yesterday. A warm feeling surged in her heart, and she couldn't take her eyes off his face for a long time. "You watch your step." Lucian turned around suddenly and looked at her. When their eyes met, Roxanne felt her heart skip a beat. She tried to keep her composure and smiled. Thank you." Lucian furrowed his brows as his eyes flickered. After yesterday's incident, he felt reluctant to let go of Roxanne, who looked perfectly healthy. After a long while, he retracted his gaze with some self-control. The rain had stopped when the two reached the parking lot. The custom-made jacket Lucian used to shelter them from the rain was wet. Even his arms got soaked from the rain. Standing by the side of the car, Roxanne watched him open the door and put his jacket on the back seat with no change in expression. After a moment of hesitation, she decided to sit in the passenger seat. Soon, Lucian got into the car and drove toward her house. I wonder what they are doing now." Feeling uneasy by the silence inside the car, Roxanne quickly searched for a topic. Lucian raised his eyes and glanced at her face reflected in the rearview mirror. Caden will take good care of them. You can call him if you're worried. Roxanne grinned. It's okay. I believe Caden will take good care of them. As they spoke about the kids, Roxanne couldn't help but think of how they left without hesitation this morning. She wondered what was on the kids' minds when they did that and decided to find the answer when she got home. Meanwhile, at the mansion, Caden bought breakfast for the kids. After breakfast, the three kids rushed upstairs and hid inside Archie and Benny's room and started whispering among themselves. I wonder how Mommy is feeling now. A frown instantly creased Benny's brow as he sounded worried. Patting his brother on the shoulder, Archie comforted. Didn't Mommy already say she's okay now? Moreover, there's Daddy beside Mommy, so she'll be fine. Estella nodded vigorously. Daddy will take good care of. Suddenly, Estella faltered and looked at Archie and Benny timidly. In response, Archie and Benny gave her an encouraging look. Estella finally said, Daddy will take good care of Mommy. Mommy is incredibly skilled in medicine, so I'm sure she will be fine. As Estella spoke, she balled her fists to encourage herself. The most important thing now is for Daddy and Mommy to get back together through this opportunity. Archie analyzed rationally. I think after what happened yesterday, Mommy will not avoid Daddy and Essie anymore. A smile gradually bloomed on their faces. Estella, in particular, had a vibrant smile. Seeing Estella's beaming face, Benny couldn't help but ask, Essie, wouldn't your Mommy be sad if she finds out how much you adore Mommy? Hearing that, the smile on Estella's face gradually faded, and she became a little down. Benny felt somewhat guilty and glanced at Archie, worried if he had said something wrong and had upset Estella. Archie felt worried as well and wanted to change the topic. Before he could do that, Estella said hesitantly, I don't have a Mommy. Taken aback, Archie and Benny doubted their ears. What does she mean by she doesn't have a Mommy? Benny frowned and was about to pursue the matter when suddenly a knock on the door sounded. The kids quickly restrained their expressions and went to open the door. With a smile, Caden stood at the door and said, let's go downstairs and see who is here. After exchanging a suspicious glance, the kids scampered down. The kids were stunned for a moment when they saw the people coming in from the door. Then, a big smile appeared on their faces. Mommy. The three kids quickly rushed toward Roxanne. Roxanne chuckled as she held all three of them in her embrace and patted them on their head. Mommy, why are you back so soon? Shouldn't you spend more time at the hospital? Worried, Archie looked at Roxanne. As Archie spoke, he glanced at Lucian as he had secret plans for them. If Mommy stays for another 2 days at the hospital, Daddy will have more time to accompany her. Lucian knew Archie was glancing at him, but he didn't know what was on the latter's mind. Meanwhile, Roxanne was rendered speechless by Archie's question. So you want me to stay at the hospital? At that, the kids exchanged glances. Archie answered with a serious look. We're only worried about you, Mommy. We thought maybe you should be hospitalized for at least 2 days. A surge of warmth emerged in Roxanne's heart after hearing that. Pretending to be torn, she looked at Archie. But I miss you guys. We can visit Mommy at the hospital. Benny's cute voice rang out. Amused by Benny, Roxanne couldn't help but kiss him. Estella and Archie quickly moved closer to Roxanne after they saw her kissing Benny. Archie stuck out his face before Roxanne straight away. With a smile, Roxanne planted a kiss on Archie's cheek. Estella stood timidly behind Archie, not daring to go forward, but her face was full of anticipation. A glint of guilt flashed in Roxanne's eyes when she saw how Estella behaved. Estella was not like this in the past. The tension between her and Lucian had made Estella behave timidly in front of her. Thinking of that, Roxanne smiled at Estella and pulled the latter close to her. Then, she kissed her on her chubby cheeks and hugged her tightly. Essie, I want to thank you for trying to wake me up with Archie and Benny. Otherwise, I don't know when I'll regain consciousness. Estella's eyes gradually brightened, and a smile appeared on her little face after Roxanne thanked her. Roxanne felt Estella slowly wrapping her arms around her neck and smiled wider. Just when she was about to let go, Estella suddenly kissed her on the face. Roxanne froze for a few seconds and was touched after the entire situation sunk in. After witnessing Roxanne and Estella's reconciliation, Archie and Benny rushed toward them excitedly, and each planted a kiss on Roxanne's cheek. Standing at the door, Lucian looked at Roxanne and the kids. There was a rare warmth emotion flashing in his eyes. Mr. Farwell. Caden approached him. Lucian looked away from the four and nodded in acknowledgement at Caden. Thank you for your hard work. Go home and have a rest. I'll leave now. Please call me whenever you need me. Caden bobbed his head in response. Subsequently, he turned around to leave without hesitation. It has been a while since Mr. Farwell and Ms. Jarvis get along. I shouldn't stay and become the third wheel. Initially, Roxanne wanted to see Caden out. However, Estella held tightly onto her and refused to let go. After some deliberation, Roxanne still couldn't get up. Mommy, have you eaten? Archie looked at Roxanne with concern. It wasn't until then that Roxanne remembered that they hadn't eaten all day. After she regained consciousness, the experts checked her condition. Then, she had a heated discussion with Lucian. She wasn't feeling hungry. However, she felt Lucian should eat something after all he had been through yesterday. At that thought, Roxanne patted Estella's back reassuringly. I need to cook. Why don't you play with Archie and Benny? Estella hugged her and refused to let go. Thus, Roxanne explained resignedly, your daddy and I haven't eaten yet. We'll keep you company after our meals, all right? Upon hearing that, the girl finally released Roxanne and stared intently at her. Roxanne smiled, patted her head, and turned to Lucian. Come on in, Mr. Farwell. I'll prepare some food. The look in Lucian's eyes darkened before he ambled into the living room. It's been a long time since I was invited by her. This feels pretty good. The children were relieved to see the relationship between the two adults improved after Roxanne left the hospital. As Lucian sat on the couch, he watched the children play with each other. Inside the kitchen, Roxanne was preparing the food nonchalantly. As a result of all that, the atmosphere in the mansion became surprisingly heartwarming. Not long after, Roxanne exited the kitchen with 2 sandwiches and a glass of hot milk before putting them in front of Lucian. It's nearly time for lunch, so just eat these first to hold on until then. He nodded. Just as she was about to sit next to him, her phone rang again on the coffee table. They both lowered their heads and saw Jack's name on the screen. While Lucian frowned, Roxanne wanted to answer the phone because she knew Jack was simply worried about her. As she reached for the phone, Lucian snatched it away. Roxanne furrowed her eyebrows with slight panic. I want to tell Mr. Damaris that I'm safe. Motionlessly, he waited for the ringing to stop on its own. Then, he expressionlessly turned off her phone and tossed it aside. She felt resigned upon seeing that. In the past, she would have immediately started arguing with him. However, she refrained from doing so, thinking it would be rude because he had just saved her from the brink of death and taken care of her for the entire night. Thus, Roxanne silently withdrew her hand and sat next to Lucian. Jack came by last night, he disclosed in a deep voice. That shocked her a little. Was it when I was still in a coma? There's no way I wouldn't have known about it otherwise. You were already awake by that point, but it was getting late, so I told him about your situation and asked him not to disturb your rest. She still felt something was off. It was that simple. I know how Lucian feels about Jack. There's no way their meeting ended that simply last night. In response to her question, Lucian frowned at her. What else do you expect? Roxanne smiled sheepishly and stopped asking. If Jack already knows about my situation, why did he call me? Just as she wondered about that, he spoke again. Even though I already told him about your situation, he still called you. Maybe he has an ulterior motive. She was stunned by his sudden remark as she stared at his countenance. I feel like the motive he's thinking about is not the one I have in mind. When Lucian recalled the scene at the research institute, a cold look entered his eyes. Back then, when you had just fallen into a coma after being poisoned, Jack refused to send you to the hospital. Tell me, what do you think his intentions are? Upon hearing that, Roxanne halted what she was thinking as she wavered. He coldly continued, do you think traditional medicine could have saved you back then? Without hesitation, she shook her head. I may be unconscious back then, but I know how dire the situation was. Even if the person who fainted weren't me, I wouldn't necessarily have the courage to accept the responsibility of treating them. As he gazed intensely at her, he signaled for her to continue, so she did. Traditional medicine has been passed down for many years because it's effective in combating chronic diseases. The best way to handle my situation yesterday was to send me to the emergency room immediately because the poison gas had invaded my brain. Acupuncture was worth a try, but the risk of failing is greater. Of course, I wouldn't take that risk when better options were available. What would have happened if you didn't receive treatment in time? Lucian inquired. Roxanne gave that question some thought and replied seriously. If it weren't too serious, then I would have been in a vegetative state. If it were, I would have died. Even if I was lucky enough to wake up, I think I would have become mentally disabled. When her train of thought ended there, she expressed her gratitude to him. If not for your help, one of those 3 scenarios would have been my fate, Mr. Farwell. So, thank you. As though he didn't hear her thanks, he continued to focus on Jack. Do you think Jack was unaware of those 3 possibilities? Roxanne hesitated to shake her head. Jack definitely knows about those possibilities, but if I shake my head, Lucian will become more suspicious of him, and I don't want either of us to suspect him even more. Upon detecting her hesitation, Lucian stared at her coldly. You still don't think he's suspicious? Frowning, she speculated, maybe. Mr. Damaris has his reasons. After all, he may have experience using acupuncture to treat those attacked by that poison. If that's true, it brings up another question. Why does he just so happen to know how to deal with such a rare poison? If that's not the case, why did he insist on not sending me to the hospital and opting to use acupuncture to treat me instead? While chaos roamed in her mind, she put on a calm facade. Gazing at her, Lucian questioned, do you know what Jack was doing when I went to him? Roxanne tensed up upon hearing his tone, thinking that he had discovered some sort of irrefutable evidence. If that happens, I may need to change my long-standing impression of Jack. As he recalled Jack's actions, he narrowed his eyes. He was preparing to remove your clothes. He's just an animal who takes advantage of you, yet you still trust him so much. That dumbfounded her. I thought he had ironclad evidence, but that's all? Due to her frequent acupuncture sessions, she was used to taking patients' clothes off during treatment. It was why she was dumbstruck by Lucian's reaction. Did Lucian really think Jack took off my clothes because he wanted to? Then again, Lucian did get jealous many times before. I'm not sure how to describe what I'm feeling right now.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.